Imagine this, a wild Mustang caught in the thick of the forest, trapped in the unlikeliest of places, a tree, his body bruised, exhausted, and unable to escape the jaws of a wolf pack, circling close by. Everyone thought it was the end, but then, out of nowhere, something incredible happened. A pair of hunters, expecting only to track game, stumbled upon the impossible. A Mustang with a story to tell and a fight for survival. No one could have foreseen. What happens next will change everything. You think you know about second chances? Stay with us, because this is a tale of resilience, fate, and an unexpected miracle. The forest was alive with the sounds of the wild, yet in the midst of it, there was an eerie silence, a silence so thick it seemed to press against the trees, drowning out the rustling leaves and chirping birds. A wild Mustang, once free and untamed, now lay trapped, his body tangled in the gnarled branches of a tree. His coat, once a brilliant chestnut red, was now matted with blood and dirt. His breath came in ragged gasps, every inhale sending a sharp pain through his body. He was trapped, helpless. The wolf pack was closing in, their growls reverberating through the woods, the scent of blood drawing them nearer. The Mustang's wide, terrified eyes flickered between the wolves and the forest beyond, but there was nowhere to run. He was stranded, his legs tangled in the thick branches of the tree. The wolves circled, biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike. No one had seen him fall. No one had heard his desperate struggle to escape the tree. No one. That is, except for the hunters who had come searching for game. They had been tracking through the dense forest, their footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush, when one of them, Jason, spotted something out of the corner of his eye, a flash of chestnut red in the shadows. "Hey, look at that," Jason whispered to his partner, Matt. He motioned toward the clearing ahead, where the Mustang was trapped, struggling to free himself from the tree's grasp. Matt squinted through the trees. "What the hell is that? A horse? How the hell did it get tangled up in there?" Jason had no answer, but there was something deeply unsettling about the scene. The Mustang's eyes were wide with fear, his legs buckling under the strain of his injuries. The wolves were drawing closer, and soon the horse would be too weak to defend himself. "We need to help him," Jason said, his voice filled with urgency. But Matt hesitated. "Are you sure? This is a wild Mustang, Jason. He's not our responsibility. He's been living out here for a reason." Jason's heart clenched at the thought of leaving the Mustang to face certain death. It didn't feel right. He looked at the animal, its desperate eyes pleading for help, and something inside him shifted. He knew what he had to do, without waiting for Matt's response. Jason drew his rifle from his back and made his way toward the clearing. As he approached, he felt the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders. It was a risk the Mustang could lash out, could strike him with the same fierce spirit that had kept him alive in the wild for so long. But Jason had seen enough suffering in his life. He wasn't going to turn his back on this animal. The wolves growled low, their presence sending a chill through the air. Jason raised his rifle, his eyes never leaving the pack as he moved cautiously toward the Mustang. But the horse, despite his injuries, was alert. His body trembled, but his instincts kicked in. The Mustang's eyes locked onto Jason's, and for a moment, they shared an unspoken understanding. The man wasn't there to hurt him. He was there to help. As Jason moved closer, he whispered to the Mustang, his voice low and soothing, "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. We're going to get you out of this." The wolves hesitated, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. They were unsure now, their growls faltering. Jason kept his eyes on them, but he didn't allow fear to control him. His focus remained on the Mustang, whose body seemed to sag with relief at the sound of Jason's voice. The tension in the air was palpable, the weight of the Mustang's plight hanging over them all. The horse's breathing slowed, but it was clear that his strength was fading fast. Jason knew he had to act quickly, with a few more cautious steps. He was at the Mustang's side, his hands, steady despite the situation, reached out to untangle the horse's legs from the branches. He could feel the warmth of the Mustang's body, the pulse of life under his skin. But the horse was barely holding on. As the last branch was cleared from the Mustang's legs, Jason gently urged the horse to rise. He held the animal's neck, guiding him to his feet. The Mustang, though weak and trembling, stood unsteady but alive. Jason looked over his shoulder. Matt had come up behind him, his face pale with concern. The wolves had retreated, sensing they had lost their opportunity. "We did it," Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. But the Mustang's journey wasn't over. He was still weak, still in pain, and the woods were no place for an injured animal. To recover, Jason looked ahead, his gaze scanning the distant trees. There was a cabin not far from here, a place where they could shelter the Mustang and nurse him back to health. "We need to get him to safety," Jason said, his voice resolute. And with that, the first step in an incredible journey had begun, a journey of healing, trust, and survival. Jason had seen many things in his life, things that shook him to the core, things that made him question humanity and its place in the world. But this was different. The wild Mustang standing by his side was an enigma. The animal was no longer just a creature of the wild. He had become something much more. Jason didn't know why, but he felt an overwhelming need to protect him, to guide him through whatever lay ahead. The Mustang's body trembled as they moved slowly through the forest. Each step weighed down by exhaustion. His ribs were visible, and the blood from his wounds had begun to stain the ground beneath him. Jason kept a steady hand on his shoulder, whispering reassurances even though he wasn't sure the horse could even hear him. The Mustang's body language had changed. He was still skittish, but there was an unspoken trust in the way he leaned into Jason's touch, a silent acknowledgement of the safety the man had offered. They moved cautiously, the threat of the wolves still fresh in their minds. The pack had retreated for now, but Jason knew they wouldn't give up that easily. The wild was full of danger, and they were in the heart of it. The trees around them seemed to close in, the shadows growing longer as the sun dipped lower in the sky. The path ahead was uncertain, but Jason couldn't turn back, not now. Not when the Mustang was counting on him. They had been walking for what felt like hours, the weight of the journey pressing down on Jason's shoulders. The Mustang had slowed, his steps growing heavier, and Jason could feel his strength waning. It wasn't just the wounds, it was the toll of surviving in the wild, the constant vigilance, the fight for food and water. Jason had no idea how long the horse had been out there, but he knew this: the Mustang needed help, and he was the one who would provide it. A flicker of movement caught Jason's eye just beyond the trees. He could see the faint outline of the cabin. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. He had no idea what condition the cabin was in. It had been abandoned for years, used only by hunters and travelers looking for shelter from the elements. But it was their best option, and right now, that was enough. "We're almost there, buddy," Jason murmured, urging the Mustang forward. The horse stumbled, his legs buckling under the weight of his own body. Jason's heart stopped for a moment as he watched the Mustang struggle to stay on his feet. Without thinking, he rushed forward, grabbing the Mustang's reins and helping him back up. The horse's eyes met his, filled with exhaustion, but also something else. Something deeper, a connection. For the briefest moment, Jason thought he saw a flicker of something like gratitude in the horse's eyes. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough to fill Jason with a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about saving a wild animal. This was about something more, a bond, a connection between two creatures that had once been strangers, now relying on each other to survive. They continued forward, Jason leading the Mustang with steady steps, the cabin now only a few hundred yards away. But as they approached the clearing, a sound suddenly broke the silence: low growls, faint but unmistakable. Jason froze, his hand instinctively going to his rifle. He turned, eyes scanning the woods, searching for the source of the sound. There, just beyond the tree line, he saw them, the wolves. They hadn't given up. Jason's pulse quickened as he looked at the Mustang, who was now visibly weakening, his legs trembling beneath him. He had to make a choice: stand and fight or keep moving forward. But the wolves were closing in, their growls growing louder, more confident. The clearing ahead was their only chance. The cabin was within reach, but Jason knew they couldn't outrun the pack if the wolves were determined. It would be a fight for survival. "Come on, buddy, just a little further," Jason urged, his voice calm but urgent. He could feel the Mustang's hesitation, the animal's fear palpable in the air. Jason knew the horse was exhausted, that his body was on the brink of collapse, but they had come too far to give up now. As the wolves drew closer, Jason's resolve hardened. He would not let the Mustang down, not after everything they had been through. With a deep breath, he steadied himself, ready to face whatever came next. Jason tightened his grip on the reins. He knew this was their moment. They had to make it to the cabin, or they wouldn't survive the night. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating, as Jason and the Mustang neared the cabin. Every step felt like an eternity. The growls of the wolves were growing louder, their hunger palpable as they circled the clearing. Jason's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. The cabin was within reach, but it felt as though the wolves were closing in with every passing second. The Mustang was barely able to keep his balance, his legs shaking from exhaustion, blood staining the ground as they moved. Jason could see the strain in the horse's eyes, the fear and uncertainty that mirrored his own. But there was no time to rest, no time to second-guess their situation. "Stay with me, buddy," Jason muttered under his breath, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. His grip on the reins tightened as he encouraged the Mustang forward, each step taking them closer to safety. But the wolves were not going to let them go that easily. Jason's gaze flicked to the forest, his rifle still clutched tightly in his left hand, ready for whatever came next. He knew there was no way to outrun the wolves. They were faster, more agile, and in numbers far greater than he could handle. Alone, the only thing that mattered now was getting to the cabin before the pack descended on them. The wolves had stopped their growling for a moment, as if sensing the impending confrontation. Jason's hand hovered over the rifle's trigger, ready to take action at the first sign of an attack. The Mustang, however, seemed to sense something Jason hadn't yet grasped. Despite the fear, there was a subtle shift in the horse's body language. His head was high, his ears alert. The Mustang wasn't just a passive participant anymore. He was aware, more present in the moment than he had been since Jason had first found him. The two of them had become a team. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about a shared instinct, a shared will to make it through the night. Jason turned his attention back to the wolves. They were in the clearing now, their eyes glinting with hunger as they closed in from all sides. The lead wolf, a large gray beast, took a step forward, its body low to the ground, muscles tensed, ready to strike. The pack followed suit, their movements synchronized in a coordinated attack. Jason's mind raced, weighing his options. The rifle was loaded, but he only had so many shots. The Mustang was too slow, too injured to run. Their chances were slim, but the cabin was close, and they were almost there. He had one shot, one chance to make it. "Come on, just a little further," Jason urged, his voice unwavering even as panic began to set in. The wolves were now just feet away, their teeth bared, their growls echoing in the cold air. The Mustang hesitated, his body trembling from exhaustion, but Jason could see a flicker of determination in his eyes. This was no longer a wild animal. This was a partner, a living, breathing creature who had fought for his life. And now so would Jason. The wolves lunged in a flash. Jason raised his rifle, taking aim at the lead wolf. The crack of the shot broke the silence of the forest, the sound echoing through the trees. The lead wolf yelped in pain, falling back momentarily stunned. The pack faltered, unsure of what to do next. It was their moment of hesitation, Jason's chance to push forward. "Go!" Jason shouted, urgency in his voice. The Mustang, despite his injuries, surged forward with a strength that surprised Jason. The horse's hooves pounded against the ground, carrying them toward the cabin. Jason's eyes never left the wolves as they regrouped, but they were now a few steps too late. The Mustang had found a burst of courage, and with Jason guiding him, they sprinted for the shelter. As they reached the cabin, Jason slammed open the door, pulling the Mustang inside just as the wolves circled back. Jason quickly bolted the door behind them, chest heaving as he caught his breath. The Mustang stumbled to the corner, collapsing onto the floor but alive. The wolves' growls could still be heard from outside, but they would have to wait. Jason had won this battle. The air in the cabin was thick with tension as Jason leaned against the wooden door, listening for any sign of the wolves. The growls had subsided for now, but the fear still lingered, hanging in the air like a cloud. Jason's heart raced, his breath coming in short bursts as he glanced over at the Mustang. The horse was lying on the floor in the corner, his body heaving with each labored breath. Jason took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. His mind was spinning, torn between relief and the reality of the situation. They were safe for now, but the danger was far from over. The wolves weren't gone. They were just waiting for their next chance. Outside these walls, the world was unforgiving. The Mustang let out a soft whinny, and Jason's tension snapped back. To the horse, the animal's eyes were wide, his body trembling not just from physical exhaustion, but from the mental toll of the night's events. Jason could see the fear in those eyes. The Mustang had survived so much already. But Jason knew that the hardest part wasn't over. He had to help the horse heal. But the question was how. The cabin was small, only just enough room to breathe, and it wasn't equipped for proper medical care. Jason knew what he had to do, but the reality of the situation weighed heavily on him. Without the right supplies, he couldn't do much more than offer temporary relief. "Hang in there, buddy," Jason whispered, moving to kneel by the horse. His hand gently brushed the Mustang's coat, and he could feel the animal's body twitch beneath his touch. The horse was scared, but Jason could also sense a spark of determination, a will to live that had kept him going despite everything. The sound of scratching at the door broke the silence, and Jason's blood ran cold. The wolves were back. They hadn't given up. Their persistence was maddening, a constant reminder that they were just outside, waiting for their next chance. Jason stood up slowly, glancing at the rifle leaning against the wall. He knew there was no point in trying to fight them off with only one weapon and a tired body. His only hope was to wait them out. But how long could they stay hidden in here? The Mustang needed care. He couldn't afford to wait too long. The wolves' growls grew louder, their frustration clear as they circled outside. Jason moved to the window, peering out between the cracks in the wooden boards. The moonlight cast eerie shadows across the clearing, and Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He could see the wolves' figures moving in the dark, their eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. But something else was there too, a figure moving among the trees. Jason's eyes narrowed. It was another person, someone else out here in the wilderness, at the very edge of danger. He couldn't tell if they were friend or foe, but in this world, it didn't matter. Either they were here to help or they were here to make things worse. Without thinking, Jason grabbed his rifle and headed for the door. He had to find out who or what was out there. His heart was pounding in his chest, but there was no turning back. The wolves were already closing in. If someone else could help, it could mean the difference between life and death. Jason cracked the door open just enough to peek outside. The night air was cold, and he could feel the weight of the world bearing down on him. The Mustang's whinnies echoed softly behind him, and he had to swallow hard to keep his focus. The figure moved closer, the shadows swallowing them whole. Jason's fingers tightened around the rifle, ready for anything. As the figure stepped into the moonlight, he saw that it wasn't a person at all. It was something far more unexpected, a horse, but not just any horse. It was a wild stallion, a massive black figure that seemed to radiate power. The Mustang inside the cabin stirred at the sight, lifting his head weakly as though recognizing the presence of his kind. Jason could hardly believe what he was seeing. The stallion was beautiful, strong, untamed, and in that moment, Jason understood. The Mustang wasn't alone. There was more to this world than he had thought. The stallion was a symbol of hope, a reminder of the wildness that still existed out here. Untouched by fear and desperation, the stallion's hooves hit the ground, and the sound seemed to break the tension in the air. The wolves, sensing the change, hesitated for a moment. Jason couldn't explain it, but something about the stallion made the pack pull back. They were no longer as eager to approach. The figure of the wild stallion seemed to pulse with an energy that Jason couldn't describe, but it was enough to give him the strength to fight back. With a final glance at the Mustang lying in the cabin, Jason knew he had to act. Jason stepped outside, determination filling his chest. The battle wasn't over yet. The wild stallion stood at the edge of the clearing, his dark coat gleaming under the moonlight like a shadow in the night. His powerful frame exuded confidence. the sheer force of his presence seeming to challenge the wolves circling just beyond the tree line. Jason could feel the tension rising, a silent agreement between him and the stallion that neither of them would back down. For a moment, everything was still. The wind held its breath, the wolves' growls barely audible in the distance. Jason could sense the stallion's intelligence in the way he held himself, every muscle in his body taut, ready for whatever came next. He wasn't just any horse. This was a creature forged by the wild, a symbol of survival against all odds. Jason's grip tightened around his rifle as he scanned the surrounding woods. The stallion had done something extraordinary, but it wasn't enough to guarantee their safety. The wolves would circle back. They always did. But in that brief moment of silence, Jason realized something. The stallion wasn't just offering protection. He was offering an alliance. He had come to show Jason that he wasn't alone, that nature had a way of bringing the unexpected into a fight. Jason had thought that the Mustang would need to be the one to fight to survive, but now it was clear the stallion was here to prove that even the wildest of creatures needed help. A soft whinny from the cabin broke Jason's thoughts. The Mustang, inside, had risen to his feet, his injuries still visible, but his spirit clearly lifted by the arrival of the wild stallion. Jason turned back toward the clearing and saw that the stallion had begun to step closer, moving with an elegance that belied his size. It was as if the horse knew the outcome of the fight before it even started. Jason couldn't help but admire the stallion's strength. The two horses, despite being so different, one wild, the other tamed, had a shared understanding. It was as if the stallion's presence had unlocked a spark of resilience in the Mustang, a reminder that he too could overcome his wounds. But Jason couldn't afford to wait and watch. The wolves weren't the only threat. The stallion might be a force of nature, but he couldn't fight a pack of wolves alone. Jason's mind raced as he formulated a plan. If the stallion could keep the wolves at bay for long enough, he might have time to gather the Mustang and find a better position. The wolves were getting bolder now, their growls growing louder as they pushed forward. Jason could see their yellow eyes gleaming in the shadows. This was their moment. They had to strike fast. Jason turned back toward the cabin, urgency now filling every step he took. The Mustang was moving again, though with hesitation, as if sensing the coming danger. Jason needed to act quickly. He grabbed the rope he had set aside earlier, tying it securely to the Mustang's halter before turning toward the stallion. "Stay close," Jason muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible. The stallion snorted in response, his eyes focused and unyielding. Jason knew that this wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a test of trust, courage, and perseverance. The wild stallion had shown up out of nowhere, but now it was Jason's turn to show the horse that the bond they shared could lead them through anything. It was more than just a fight. It was a partnership, with the Mustang tethered. Jason moved toward the wild stallion, his rifle ready in hand. He had one shot at this. The pack of wolves was closing in fast, and he needed to get both horses to safety before the situation turned deadly. The stallion moved alongside him, his dark figure like a shadow in the night. Jason could feel the animal's strength next to him, the air thick with the sense of an unspoken agreement. They would face this challenge together. The wolves, sensing the challenge, stepped forward, their growls escalating into vicious snarls. But Jason wasn't afraid. He was prepared. The final test had begun. The forest felt suffocating now, the air thick with the scent of pine and impending danger. Jason's heart raced as he watched the wild stallion and the wounded Mustang, their fates intertwined in this moment of truth. Mustang and stallion stood side by side, their eyes fixed on the encroaching pack of wolves. The creatures were circling closer, their growls echoing in the trees, the sound of their hunger sending a chill down Jason's spine. He felt his breath catch in his chest. This was it. There was no turning back now. The stakes had never been higher. He had to protect both horses, especially the Mustang, whose injuries made him vulnerable. The stallion, undeterred by the looming threat, stepped forward, his muscles rippling beneath his coat as he moved. His dark eyes locked onto Jason's for a moment, and Jason could feel the silent understanding between them. The wild horse wasn't just protecting himself. It was protecting them all. The bond between them had grown stronger over the course of the night, and Jason couldn't help but wonder if this wild stallion had always known what would happen. Jason raised his rifle, the heavy weight of it in his hands grounding him in the moment. He wasn't just holding a weapon, he was holding a lifeline, a chance for survival. His fingers tightened around the trigger, but he knew better than to act impulsively. Patience was key. The wolves had to make their move first. The wind rustled the leaves above, sending a sudden chill through the clearing. Jason's eyes darted back and forth, every nerve on edge as he surveyed the scene. The wolves were closing in, their eyes gleaming with hunger, but they hesitated. Jason knew that they could smell the fear, but they could also sense the power of the wild stallion, an animal who would fight to the death if necessary. The stallion let out a low, guttural whinny, a challenge to the pack. It was a sound that echoed through the trees, a reminder that not all prey was easily taken. The wolves, their instincts sharp as ever, paused for a moment, considering the risk. They had to be sure. Jason held his breath, waiting. The stallion had given the wolves a warning, but would it be enough? In the silence, the Mustang shifted, his legs trembling with effort as he tried to stand taller. Jason turned his attention to him, watching closely for any sign of weakness. The Mustang was still injured. His side was slick with blood, and his breathing was shallow, but he was standing. He wasn't giving up. Jason's heart swelled with pride for the Mustang. He had come so far, pushed beyond his limits, and now, with the wild stallion by his side, he had a chance, a real chance. The wolves, however, weren't about to be outdone. They were closing in again, their low growls reverberating in the air, ready to pounce. But Jason had one more trick up his sleeve. He took a deep breath, then raised his rifle, aiming it skyward. The blast echoed through the forest, a deafening sound that shattered the tense quiet. The wolves jumped back, momentarily startled by the sudden noise, but it was enough. The stallion took that moment of confusion to lunge forward, his powerful hooves striking the earth with a force that sent the wolves scattering in all directions. The pack hesitated, their instincts telling them that the fight would not be worth it. Jason didn't waste any time. He grabbed the Mustang's halter, pulling him close as the wild stallion created a barrier between them and the wolves. The wolves, realizing they had been outmatched, turned tail and fled into the shadows, their howls slowly fading into the distance. The clearing fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of the two horses and Jason's pounding heart. The danger had passed, at least for now, but Jason knew this wouldn't be the last time the wolves came. He had bought them time, but time was all he had. For a moment, everything seemed still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The stallion, his head held high, stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the forest with cautious eyes. The Mustang, still shaken, took a hesitant step forward, following Jason's lead. Jason exhaled slowly, wiping his brow. They had done it. They had made it through the night. But the night wasn't over yet. The first light of dawn broke through the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The stillness of the night had been replaced by the soft chirping of birds and the distant rustling of leaves. Jason, the Mustang, and the wild stallion had made it through the night, but the real test was just beginning. The Mustang's injuries were grave, and though he had made it through the wolf attack, Jason knew he couldn't keep him out here much longer. His breaths were labored, his body weak. He was fighting, but Jason could see the strain in every movement. The stallion, on the other hand, seemed strong, as if he had been made for this kind of life. His wild eyes reflected determination and a primal knowledge of how to survive in the forest. He was a creature of the wild, untamed, unbroken, and powerful. Jason looked up at the small cabin in the distance. It wasn't much, but it was a refuge, a place of safety where he could tend to the Mustang's wounds and give him a chance at survival. The stallion, however, had made it clear that he wasn't going to be tied down. He was a symbol of freedom, a creature who would never be controlled, not even by the man who had fought by his side. Jason walked over to the Mustang, gently resting, his hand on the horse's trembling neck. "We're almost there," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You just have to hold on a little longer." The Mustang nickered softly, as though understanding his words. His eyes met Jason's, filled with trust and a deep, quiet gratitude. Jason's heart swelled in his chest. He had come to realize something over the course of their journey. It wasn't just about survival, it was about connection. The bond they had formed was something beyond words, beyond any human understanding. It was a bond forged in the heat of battle, in the face of danger, and in the quiet moments where they both relied on each other. As they slowly made their way toward the cabin, the wild stallion followed, keeping a watchful eye on the perimeter. Jason knew he couldn't keep the stallion here forever. He was a free spirit, and no matter how much Jason wanted to, he couldn't cage him. The wildness in his soul couldn't be tamed, but for now, they were together. For now, they had made it through the night, and the Mustang had a fighting chance at survival. That's all Jason could ask for. When they reached the cabin, Jason led the Mustang inside. The warmth of the small structure was a stark contrast to the cold, harsh world outside. He set the horse down carefully, his hands trembling as he began to tend to the Mustang's wounds. The stallion, watching from the doorway, seemed content for now, his presence a silent reminder of the bond they had shared. Jason looked out the window, his eyes meeting the horizon. The wild stallion had made it clear he wasn't meant for this life. He was meant for the open plains, for the freedom of the wild, and Jason had to let him go. He turned back to the Mustang, who had already begun to rest, the tension in his body slowly easing. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, Jason felt a sense of peace settle in his heart. The Mustang had survived, and so had he. Blaze's journey from fear to freedom was a testament to the power of resilience, trust, and the unbreakable bond between a horse and its protector. With each step forward, they both learned that hope can flourish even in the darkest of times. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that courage can change everything. Stay tuned for more inspiring tales.